So typically the very first question I get when I talk with someone, whether it's a mentee or a student at Cowgirls with Cameras, or heck, just a photographer that I meet somewhere who knows that I utilize Lightroom, is which Lightroom is right for me. That is kind of an age-old question for photographers. And I love this quote: "The risk of a wrong decision is preferable to the terror of indecision." And if you're one of those folks who gets really stuck with making a decision, and this Lightroom decision is like really bothering you, I want you to know you can't make a wrong decision. So kind of let that go. It's all going to be okay. At the end of this video, hopefully your fears will be relieved and you'll have a really clear indication of where you want to start your Lightroom journey or continue on your Lightroom journey. But please know you can't make a wrong decision. All three of the Lightroom versions that I'm going to talk about today, and I am including mobile in that because that is a choice as well. All of them are great, and you're not going to make a mistake. And if you do change your mind and decide you want to use a different one later on, heck, there's ways that you can get there. So don't overthink this. So there's three things before we even start having this discussion that I want to cover about Lightroom. One of those is Lightroom is a work style, lifestyle choice. In other words, it's going to become the way that you interact with your images. And if you try to utilize it in any other way, it is really, really awkward. It is not a software program that you bring an image in, edit, and send it out. It is not a software program where you import a batch of images and then you just completely close that catalog down and never look at it again. It really is the interface between you and your photos. Back in when I was a film photographer, I actually had a room that was devoted to negatives, and I would go in there. They were all cataloged, they were organized, and that was where I went to pull a negative to process it. And that's what Lightroom is today. It is that equivalent of that negative room in my old film days. So please know that that is the case. Also, Lightroom is non-destructive editing. So it never alters your raw or original files. It simply creates an overlay over those, and that is how Adobe Camera Raw works. But in general, and it's going to work that way whether you use it in Photoshop or elsewhere, or in Lightroom in this case. But it's not going to alter that base image. And I will also tell you there are at least 3 ways to do everything in Lightroom. So the way that I may show you, or the ways that I talk about, that may be a way that you've never done it, and your way is right and my way is right. So that's really cool. And please know that that's the case. That's the case in a lot of Adobe software as well. So there's really kind of 2 flavors of Lightroom, and one of the flavors is kind of a mix. It's a swirl, so to speak. So there's Lightroom Classic. This is the OG version of Lightroom, and it has the most features and options, especially around cataloging. And then there's Lightroom CC and mobile. And I am going to be referring to Lightroom CC as Lightroom CC in this video, because otherwise it gets horribly confusing if I don't add the CC. And I will say mobile or Lightroom mobile for the mobile version, and that's the version that you're going to interact with on your iPad. So if I don't say the CC, it gets terribly confusing, but Adobe has dropped the CC, and that is now the Lightroom. When they just mention the word Lightroom, that's what they're talking about. Lightroom Classic is the other version that they talk about, although Lightroom Classic is the OG version of Lightroom. So there are some major differences between the 2 different types of platforms, between how CC handles your images and how Classic handles your images. But the primary difference is in cataloging. So when we're talking about features, cataloging is the place that you're going to see the most difference in the 2 pieces of software. What I want you to know is that your editing functionality is the same in Lightroom CC and Lightroom Classic. It looks radically different, but all of the features are there. You just have to hunt around for them a little bit if you've used one over the other for a period of time. Trust me, it's there. You just got to hunt it down. Lightroom Mobile is sometimes a little bit behind Lightroom CC in getting some of the newer features. Mobile operating systems are different than desktop and laptop operating systems. So sometimes it takes a little bit to get everything to that point. So just be aware that there may be a slight lag. Some feature in editing may not quite be available in your mobile version yet, but it will be on its way if it's in Lightroom CC. So back to the differences between the two. The primary difference between these two pieces of two platforms, let's call them that, of Lightroom, is that how they store and process your images for the cataloging features. So Lightroom Classic has storage that is local. That means it is on a hard drive like this one. Like it's on little external hard drives, big external hard drives. I have a gigantic one over here. So it handles your photos, and that your photos can be strung across multiple ones of these. And if you're a professional photographer who does a lot of images, and with today's cameras, trust me, you'll get dozens of these. I have a whole drawer full right down here at my feet. So the Lightroom Classic is going to point to those images on local storage. It only points to the images in cloud storage that you have put there either through Lightroom Mobile or Lightroom CC. So it does have a cloud storage part, but it is not the primary way that your images are stored. And thus your images can be scattered and sort of, lightly tethered to Lightroom software. If you move an image on a local drive, like let's say I copy off a folder for a shoot off of this drive and put it on a different one and then delete it on this one. And I do that in my Finder because I'm Mac, or your File Explorer, I think is what they call it for PC folks. If I do that and I don't do it in Lightroom doesn't know. It's like, I can't find those images. They were on this hard drive and then you moved them and now they're not there anymore. So I don't know what to tell you, but you can relink them. So you have to remember it's a light tether between your local storage and Lightroom Classic. Because Lightroom Classic stores images locally, it can do a lot more functionality with your cataloging features. It has smart collections that are complex, that can have a lot of rules to them. Lightroom CC now has smart albums, but it's not quite the same, I want to say. And Lightroom Classic also has a lot of deep keywording functions that Lightroom CC and Lightroom Mobile just don't have. That's because Lightroom CC and Lightroom Mobile, they absorb your images. They are not stored locally, although you can keep a local copy of them. What they are is they're putting those images in the cloud, and it is Adobe's Creative Cloud. So your images will go up into the cloud, and that is where these two particular versions of Lightroom are going to grab those images from. Now, they're really designed to work together. So if you want to work on your iPad, and I have a whole video that gives you my work process for iPad videos or iPad editing on Lightroom. I absolutely love it. I've done it now for 5 years. I started it in 2020. I went very kicky and screamy through the first couple of weeks. Now I've mastered it, and I really would not like to edit any other way. As a matter of fact, I've really kind of redesigned my whole workflow around being able to use my iPad as my primary editing tool. So, any rate, because the images are stored in the cloud, they're accessible to both your desktop computer and your laptop computer and your mobile device really easily. And once you put them on one, they go to the other. Now, for those of you who are in this video with the same question I had when I started down the whole mobile editing rabbit hole, is can I put those in Lightroom Classic? Because there's some things in Lightroom Classic, especially with the keywording features, that are important to me. And so, yes, you most certainly can. They come in a singular folder called Lightroom Sync. They will organize themselves by date. So you have to get used to it being a little or different organizational structure. It's not the same that you see in your CC or in your mobile. So on your tablet or in the CC version on your desktop, it's not going to look the same in Classic, but the images are all there. And as long as they have been imported in Lightroom Mobile or Lightroom CC, and then synced to Classic, any changes that you make in Classic will sync back to those mobile and the CC version. So you can actually use all three. And to be honest, that is part of my workflow, although I have found that I use Classic a lot less than I used to. So. All right, here are some important things that you need to know and kind of a review of what we just talked about. So Classic uses local storage, whereas Lightroom CC and mobile use cloud storage. Lightroom CC does have a local storage option, but it is best functioned on a cloud. The Lightroom Classic has robust keywording, smart collections, multiple ways to sort your images, virtual copies, great amount of things when it comes to cataloging. Lightroom CC has limited keywording, and probably the biggest thing for professional photographers here is that at this point in time, so I'm recording this on September the 8th of 2025, and it may change. Things change a lot, but at this time of this recording, those keywords that you put on in Lightroom, CC or mobile do not get stored to the metadata. And you can do a limited amount of sorting with them, but it's not what you would get in Classic by any stretch of the imagination. So there's limited keywording, and Lightroom Mobile, to be honest with you, feels like mostly useless keywording because there's really not a lot you can do with it there. There are smart albums in Lightroom CC where you can designate some rules, so it puts the images in certain albums based on the rules that you give it. There are no smart collections or smart albums in Lightroom Mobile at the time of this recording. Again, things change all the time. Remember, I told you there's sometimes a little bit of a lag in between what is available on a desktop OS and what's available in mobile OS. So there's limited sorting options, and both Lightroom CC and Lightroom Mobile use something called versions versus virtual copies. Virtual copies, if you're the type of person that likes to do several different edit types for a singular image, virtual copies are much more conducive to that than the versions part of things, because you'll see them stacked in your thumbnail catalog next to each other, the virtual copies, but the versions you've got to make like 3 different clicks or 3 different touches in order to be able to get to them. So for example, if you wanted to do it, let's say you were shooting a wedding. I used to do this a lot when I did weddings. I would do a portion of the images in black and white, mostly because I like black and white. And frankly, people who are hiring me must like that too, because it was a lot in my portfolios. But I would do a color version of the image and a black and white version of the image. And then when I put together their album, sometimes I wanted the black and white images mixed in with the color. And I would be able to choose based upon what that image looked like in black and white, whether it was really appropriate in the album in black and white or in color. So that's just a way to do it. It would be harder for me to do that in Lightroom Mobile and Lightroom CC. And speaking of making albums and books and printing contact sheets and such, Lightroom Classic has modules that let you do such things. It has a slideshow module that you can really control the slideshow. So Lightroom CC and Lightroom Mobile have things that they call slideshows, but it ain't nothing compared to Lightroom Classic. Lightroom Classic also has a print module that allows you to make contact sheets. For those of you who are going in, when I taught this class live in our Cowgirls with Cameras community, people were like, I don't even know what a contact sheet is. But back in the day when we had negatives, we used to make a contact sheet where we take the whole little sleeve of negatives and put them on a piece of paper. And that way you could use a loop and you could look at the images and decide which ones of them you wanted to mess with. And you could also show them to your clients and they could circle them. And it was kind of the way that we looked over images in the proof knife and a kind of pick and cull situation, but you can actually print those out in Lightroom Classic in the print module. You can also, if you have like a situation, when I did fairs back in the day, we would do like a print package where you could get like 2 5x7s or 2 3x5s or whatever, but you can print them all on one page if you do your own printing. You can also set that up in the print module in Lightroom Classic. And you can also do a web gallery, which is not as functional as it once was. And then there's the book module, which lets you put together albums right inside of Lightroom, which I have used many times, and it's very easy to use. And there's several different places that you can have the album actually produced, or a book. My portfolios are all actually done in Lightroom, and they're printed through a company called Blurb, and they did an amazing job. So I very much have used that module a lot. There are no equivalents in Lightroom CC or Lightroom Mobile, and partially because those are very specialized things, right? They're not something that every photographer would use. Also, and another really important piece of this, if you like to use plugins, so these are things like Topaz or Nik filters. Those are very common in the photography niche that I'm in equine photography. A lot of photographers use those particular plugins. You can't use those with Lightroom CC or Lightroom Mobile. You have to have Classic in order to be able to use them inside the software. Now, there's a workaround. If you like Lightroom CC, you can use those plugins in Photoshop. And in general, when you buy them, both the Photoshop and the Lightroom version come with it. So you can use the Photoshop version. All you have to do is send the image to Photoshop from Lightroom CC, do your edit, and then send it back on over back to Lightroom, so it's in your catalog. So you can there's workarounds for that. In mobile, there isn't. there is no workaround at this point in time. Photoshop Mobile is radically different than Photoshop on a desktop. A lot of the features are there. It just is really different, and it is not at this point in time of this recording or within my knowledge that you can do any kind of plugins on the mobile versions of things. So at this point, if you choose just to go with mobile, you're going to be really limited to not using those plugins. May or may not bother you. I don't use a lot of plugins. I have Nik filters. I have Topaz. Topaz is a lifeline for me for when I screw up as a photographer and I get something slightly out of focus, or if I have to shoot at a really high ISO. Topaz is the life preserver that throws it to me to save that image if I really need to save that image. And then Nik filters are kind of fun to play with. But for majority of what I do, I don't need those things. So Lightroom Mobile works just fine. All right. So let's talk about, again, is this tool right for you? So here's some questions for you to determine if Lightroom Classic is really your tool. Do you need a highly customizable catalog? So if you're a stock photographer and you're very dependent on keywording your images in order to get them to your stock agency, Lightroom Classic is your best friend, because it's really going to help you do that in a very friendly, easy to use manner. So I really encourage you, if you are a stock photographer, that Lightroom Classic at least be part of your workflow somewhere in there. Do you need that native plugin capability? Do you rely on Topaz or do you rely on Nik filters? There's a lot of photographers who do. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you do, it's going to not be as efficient if you have Lightroom CC, and it's not even possible if you have Lightroom Mobile at this point, and we're mobile only editing. Are printing contact sheets, publishing web galleries, or books important to you? If they are, Lightroom Classic is your tool, or it needs to be at least part of your workflow process. And do you primarily work on a desktop? So this is where I tend to always cheat towards Lightroom Classic, because Lightroom Classic is a desktop tool. Like there's not a mobile version of it. And if you're only working on your desktop, if that's your tool, and by desktop, I mean laptop as well. So both of those are considered desktop operating systems. Lightroom Classic is just kind of a no-brainer pick because it has so much more functionality to it if you want to grab onto it. And honestly, for editing on a desktop, I find the way that Lightroom Classic works with being able to batch your images and copy and I just the way the modules are set up, that may partly be because I've used it for a really long time now. But I think it is a preferable tool. So if you work primarily on a desktop, you're not really interested in mobile functionality, Lightroom Classic really is your tool, and it's what I would recommend you start with. If you are okay with the limited cataloging and distractions in Lightroom Classic kind of get to you, because Lightroom CC is a much more streamlined piece of software. In other words, the distractions are minimal. When you're in the little different modules, it's very focused editing. I think that it is easier for people who get overwhelmed by options to be able to utilize, because it kind of reduces the amount of things that are in your face at any given time. So if removing distractions would help your workflow, I would recommend trying Lightroom CC. The other qualifications here are, do you have really good internet? Because remember, your images are stored in the cloud, and when you need to edit them, it needs to download a copy of that. Now, when we first started out with digital photography, images were 10 megabytes, and today's internet wouldn't be a problem. But I shoot with an R5, Canon R5, and my images run between 35 and 70 megabytes a piece. And you start having to push that up and down in poor internet situations, and it gets really aggravating really quickly. So making sure you have good internet. I cannot believe that we were blessed to get fiber internet, and I live in the middle of nowhere. So it was a dream come true. So do you frequently need access to your images on location? So this is one place where Lightroom CC just blows it out of the water, for my opinion. There's a lot of times when I need to pull up images to show somebody on my iPad or my laptop, and there's previews available like instantaneously. So all I need to do is I just need to have a device with me, and I can grab something and I can show somebody. We do a lot of these retreats and workshops and show them, hey, this is exactly what this location looks like. These are the types of shoots that you will experience. It's amazing to be able to pull those images up. And if I wanted to edit them, it's going to take a hot second for it to download onto my device. But if I just want to show somebody, those images are there and available. Fair warning, sometimes they're not available in their full resolution and beauty. So if you looked at your images going into Lightroom CC, they all went up in the cloud. You get home and you pull it up and you're like, wait a minute, everything looks just slightly out of focus. It's just because it hasn't downloaded the full version yet. So give it a second. It'll clear up and be all pretty in focus again in a moment. Do you have a lot of devices that you like to work on? So I am very addicted to my iPad, especially since I've done a lot of artwork on my iPad. I use the pencil and something called Procreate to do a lot of drawings with. So my creative juices really flow when I have the iPad in front of me. And Lightroom CC is a very nice desktop equivalent to be able to say, when I want to sit at a desk and work on a big screen, I can do that. I can also grab my mobile device and I can run over to my sofa and sit curled up with the blanket, watching television with the cat on my lap, and edit photos for hours. So again, we're going to have to be okay with limited cataloging here. And do you want to work on your iPad? Now, your iPad has to have some qualifications to be able to accept this job. I recommend that you have an iPad Pro. I have always run this on an iPad Pro. I'm not even sure if it runs on the regular versions of iPads, but I'm going to recommend a Pro. I also recommend you get something with considerable amount of memory. I have used Lightroom Mobile on a 512 and a 1 terabyte iPad Pro. Currently have a 1 terabyte. I've had that same iPad for 5 years. I'm about due for a new one. And when I get the new one, I probably will upgrade to a 2 terabyte. The only reason you need a lot of space is when you import your images into the iPad and you don't have good internet, you need to be able to turn the sync off. And so they're going to be stored locally on that iPad until you get to a place that you can upload them to the cloud. And so you kind of need some free storage in there until you can get to the cloud. That may not be a situation you run into. It is a situation I run into multiple times a year. So it's very important for me to be able to have a lot of storage on the local storage on the iPad so that I can put my images in there. So if you want to work on your iPad, Lightroom CC and mobile combo is probably right for you. Again, do you have really, really good internet? Because when you start utilizing it on the iPad and your desktop as your editing tool, now you've kind of doubled down on needing to have those images moving up and down pretty quickly. If you want to go totally mobile, you have to ask yourself if you're okay using Photoshop Mobile, or if you can have the patience, if you only have your iPad with you, that you want to wait until you get to a desktop where you can get to a full version of Photoshop if you need that for edits. So it's not that Lightroom Mobile requires you to do that. You're editing, like all the basic image editing is there. What I mean by this is if you want to do something special with that image, we all know if you've used Lightroom, at any point in time, their removal tools sometimes leave a little bit to be desired. So that software and Photoshop is just a whole ton of a lot easier to do, like major edits and removals, or if you need to do masking of some kind, that is more complicated than what Lightroom can handle. You really need that Photoshop backup. And Lightroom and Photoshop are really intended to work as two cogs in a larger machine. So they really are intended to work together in your photo editing process. So if you're okay with using the mobile version, which to be honest with you does a lot, but it doesn't do everything that the desktop version can do. If you're patient enough to wait to get to that desktop version if you need that. The plugin thing is one of the primary things that the mobile one can't do. And do you really want to use your Apple Pencil? I'm going to tell you that's one of my favorite parts of editing with the iPad is that I have that pencil. And it's really, really nice. Now, I have a Wacom tablet. When I started using the iPad, the Wacom tablet went in the closet and it's not been back out. I really like being able to do like some of the finer tuned masked brushing and stuff on my iPad. It's really nice. The pressure sensitivity pen is really fun as an artistic tool. So that is another consideration here if you're interested in Lightroom Mobile. The big question people always ask me is, can you have it all? And absolutely, positively, yes, you can. But there are a few caveats to that. And I already kind of mentioned this, but I want to go over it just a little bit more in depth. So if you want to use them all, my recommendation is that your images are culled and your initial edits are on the iPad. Syncing should be turned off on your iPad when the location has poor internet. I also don't recommend importing your entire card if you're especially a member of Overshooters Anonymous. I am a founding member of that organization. But if you are, it can overwhelm your iPad really quickly. One of the things that really helped me is being able to cull on import, which I would not normally do with larger local storage like on a desktop machine. So images are culled and initial edits are on the iPad. Then once the images are in there, I will tell you, Lightroom is relentless in seeking to get them into the cloud. And if you have poor internet wherever you are on location, you need to turn the syncing off, because otherwise you can't even access the images you just shot. And talk about frustration, that will get you every single time. So just, there's a setting, it's a little cloud. You're going to do is touch it and turn, say, pause syncing. Images are automatically added to CC when they get to the cloud. So they're waiting for you on your desktop when you get back home. If you've shot on location, they're waiting for you in your desktop version. Or if once you've uploaded them to the iPad and they go to the cloud, then they're waiting for you on any desktop version of the software. If you have that, what you want to do is you want to have your Lightroom Classic sync to a singular folder, and it will only let you do this to one catalog, by the way, and you can have one folder, so you don't get a lot. You get one catalog, one folder, but you can sync them to your Lightroom Classic there, and they'll download, and you can even designate that you want them to go to a specific area in local storage. For me, this works really nicely. I have my chosen images that go up in the cloud. That is one backup. I leave them on the card till I get home. That's a second backup. When I get home, I take them off the card, put them on local storage that never gets attached to a Lightroom catalog. It just sits there in case I need it ever. And then I have them sync to my classic catalog here on my desktop computer. And when they do that, they'll download to a local storage device on my system. And then that local storage device is backed up to Backblaze, which is a backup system. So now I have a cloud copy, a local copy, and a Backblaze copy. So I can go to bed secure in knowing that unless there's just something horrible happens and I've got worse problems than worrying about my images, chances are I have a backup copy. And as somebody who's had to use drive savers in my life a couple of different times, I can tell you that does give you a lot of peace of mind. So edits that are made in Lightroom Classic will sync back to CC or mobile if the original import was done in CC or mobile. Local backup for me is via Backblaze. I do want to note to you that unchosen images are added via copy to an external hard drive, but in my world, they're only added to Lightroom under special circumstances. So a special circumstance would be, I'm obviously an equine photographer. There's horses everywhere, right? Let's say I photograph a horse running, and this happens that occasionally horses blink when they're in the perfect stride. And so I have a horse who's got a closed eye, and I didn't notice it because, don't tell anyone, but I'm a partially blind photographer. I don't see that well. But I get it on the iPad and I blow it up, and I see that the horse's eye is closed on the image I picked because I chose it based on where that horse's feet were. Then I will go back, grab the image before or after it where the horse's eye is open, and then I use that to open the horse's eye on the image that is the one that I really wanted. So that's a special circumstance. It doesn't happen very often. So here's what I have learned in my workflow. That one of the things that I learned right off the bat, which was really hitched me up in using mobile Lightroom for a long time. And chances are, if you're still watching this video at this point, it may be the thing that's hitching you up is the cataloging features. And at the end of the day, I am not a stock photographer. I photograph now primarily as an instructor and for a few client jobs throughout the year. I do some commercial photography still. I don't do at the level that I once did for anything. And I have this thing about shooting stock images. Like, I'm like, oh, I would think I really want to put my images into a stock agency. And then I'm a little bit like, yeah, that's not as high a return on my investment as X, Y, and Z would be around here. So I don't use the cataloging features, and I don't miss them as much as I thought I would. That's the bottom line to that little diatribe. I really like mobile editing. It forces me to comb my images more deeply, and it lets me use that pencil, which really, there's something about like being out of this environment that really sparks my creativity. I love my office. It's set up to make me happy and create these videos and do a lot of teaching and mentorships and coaching. But in here, my muse She kind of sits in the corner and pouts because I don't do as many creative things in here as I do when I'm not in this room. So having it so that I can have that creativity mobile with me all the time means that that's even better. I like the accessibility of the cloud. Some people are going to shoot me for that, but I really do. That's what it's intended to do. It's intended to make our lives easier. It's intended to make our images more accessible. And although I really kind of have had that weird distrust of images that live there, I actually really like it. So I like the accessibility of it. I don't like versions, and I wished keywords were searchable and exportable in mobile and CC. I really don't like versions. I like the virtual copies in Lightroom Classic much better because they're in the little thumbnail strips and I can see what's going on with that image and I can go, oh, I like that different version. I'm one of those people who likes to experiment and play. And I will sometimes experiment with an image and I want to keep that for the future and I want to be able to see it. And that's not as easy in CC or in mobile. And then finally, I can get all of the fulfillment I need to kind of fill in the gaps where I struggle by using all three Lightrooms in conjunction with each other. But I have also learned I have to be patient and that having good internet is the key to my sanity, to be honest with you. So, my name is Kimberly Beer. I want to thank you for hanging out with me and learning about all the different versions of Lightroom. You can find me at the places on this particular slide. Hunt me up, especially on Cowgirls with Cameras with my two business partners, Kara Taylor Swift and Phyllis Burchett. We have a great podcast. If you're just catching this on YouTube for some reason and are curious, please feel free to go find us there. I am a proud PPA member and a proud member of the Equine Photographers Network as well. And I am a certified professional photographer through PPA. So you can find me again at one of these websites or on a podcast. I hope to meet you somewhere down the line and hear about your Lightroom journey. Thanks again.